Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Throne of Steel based on novel. So let's start. On the contrary, Cai'er kept close to Long Hao-chen's side with a sweet smile on her face. Her mood could hardly be any better, as if she had her own definite view of things. The demon's attack came without any prior indication. Upon daybreak, a demon army came to launch a sudden attack with a tide of countless dual-bladed demons surging towards the Exorcist Mountain Pass. As they ran, their bladed hands repeatedly stabbed the ground, as they were letting out unpleasant swishing sounds. Darkness and reeking of blood were enveloping the Exorcist Mountain Pass once again. From the defensive fort of the Exorcist Mountain Pass came out about half of the original forces forming the Brilliant Knight Regiment. In the past, they had always acted as a reserve force, only dispatched at the most critical times. Even so, they had lost a half of their troops over this period of more than a year. It wasn't that Xing Yu didn't want to use them, but only, as the aid the Night Temple sent out for the Assassin Temple, how could they lightly permit their visitors to bear the brunt of the danger? Therefore, unless it was unavoidable, Xing Yu and Shen Lingxin didn't use this Knight Regiment. The knights forming the Brilliant Knight Regiment were of course not acting as priests. They were expert in group battles and had an astonishing defensive strength, but their cultivation limited them, as they weren't really expert at healing. But when defending the city, they were much more effective than your average soldier or powerhouse from the Assassin Temple. The knights were serenely standing on a wall on the fortress. Alongside every one of them was a large amount of soldiers as well as powerhouses from the Assassin Temple. A retaliation on a large scale was unavoidable, and this battle would inevitably be incomparably dangerous. Shen Lingxin, who was the most familiar with the demon's military strategies, had already thought of a plan on how to confront a full-force demon attack. Therefore, all the trump cards at their disposal were taken out. After the knights forming the Brilliant Knight Regiments were done forming up ranks, they all immediately turned around together, making a knight salute towards the second floor of the fortress. The knights knocked on their chest, producing crashing sounds that reverberated through the whole fortress. Samba shouts followed immediately, and these tinkling sounds became a large boost of morale for the soldiers. Of course, Shen Lingxin knew that they weren't aiming this salute at him. The Brilliant Knight Regiment was under his command, but this kind of salute was only done among fellow knights. Standing at Shen Lingxin's side, Long Hao-chen stepped across and firmly thumped his right fist onto his chest, abruptly lifting rippling light high, letting out a loud shout, for the knight's glory. This loud shout reverberated in the whole Exorcist Mountain Pass, and at the same time, a brilliant pillar of light erupted from his sword, forming the first stream of light shining upon the Exorcist Mountain Pass on the verge of dawn. For the knight's glory! Every knight present shouted at the same time. At Long Hao-chen's side, Shen Lingxin was now silently cursing at him. These knights' treatment of him was undoubtedly very good too, but after all, this guy was from the Night Temple. Even if Long Hao-chen had never had true dealings with them before, they unexpectedly showed such high morale just from his presence. How could this not be a terrible source of jealousy? But of course, this jealousy was absolutely not a negative feeling. The person in question was, after all, his son-in-law. They could be considered to already be from the same family. Obviously, it was impossible for Shen Lingxin to say that he felt no sense of loss. His position in the Assassin Temple was quite considerable, but compared to Long Hao-chen's position in his Night Temple, it paled into insignificance. Shen Lingxin rapidly dispelled these thoughts and passed down a series of orders. Are the magic cannons all ready? The preparations are done. A total of 21 intact magic cannons have been put into the battlefield. They have all been charged with magic crystals. Shen Lingxin asked after a short time of ponder, for how long can they last in battle? If the attack persists, we can last with the magic crystals we have on hand for 12 hours. To prevent overheating, the best would be to undergo a process of cooling off once every quarter of an hour. Shen Lingxin nodded. The renewed possibility for the magic cannons to be used greatly boosted his confidence. Are the assigned teams in position? All ready. Good. Shen Lingxin's eyes shone with vigor, then he let out an awe-inspiring aura. Give my order that after the dual-bladed demons start their attack, the soldiers will join hands with the Brilliant Knight Regiment to keep them outside the walls. The magic cannons will all be aimed at the aerial threats. In case the enemy air force comes, let's give them a hard beating. Yes? Long Hao-chen was still standing beside Shen Lingxin. Hearing his series of orders, he could tell that the Exorcist Mountain Pass shape was not so good. Although the Alliance kept sending reinforcements, the endless demon offenses finally caused the full consumption of the fort's defensive tools. This time, they were able to replenish their magic cannons, but the Exorcist Mountain Pass was still vastly inferior in terms of strength. Now, they could only hope that the 6 great demon gods won't join the battle. Otherwise, this battle will be quite hard. Chief, it's an emergency, have a look. A soldier surveying the situation from afar suddenly shouted. Shen Lingxin hastened to the first lookout point in the 2nd floor of the fortress. Then the look on his relaxed face immediately changed greatly. Long Haochen followed him to watch the situation from above, and his mood immediately became heavy from the sight. It was merely that, within the demon armies approaching from afar, 6 gigantic brilliant pillars were soaring and shining upon the whole demon army. And these 6 gigantic pillars were gradually approaching the Exorcist Mountain Pass. No doubt, these were the 6 demon god pillars. From the information that the Exorcist Mountain Pass had, outside of the winged ox demon Sagan, who was still at the peak of the 8th step, they all reached the 9th step. After borrowing power from the amplification of their demon god pillar, their strength could only be described as terrifying. This disposition of forces from the demons clearly meant that they were prepared to have a battle to the death with the Exorcist Mountain Pass. Furthermore, the 6 great demon pillars were moving together, putting more pressure onto the Exorcist Mountain Pass as they were giving considerable boosts to the ordinary demons as well. At the same time, it gave an immense, ineffable boost to the demons' morale. Shen Lingxin clearly looked quite panicked. Although he had good self-control, from his current silence one could see that the full-force demon attack put massive pressure on the Exorcist Mountain Pass military. Uncle Shen, don't worry. Let's take the necessary measures to adapt to the situation, Long Haochen whispered in his ear, in a low voice that was only heard by Shen Lingxin. Shen Lingxin turned his head and glanced at him, before nodding rapidly. Long Haochen pulled Kia's hand, and told her after pondering for a short time, in a large-scale battle, the soldiers' morale is the most important. We have to avoid a loss of morale from our side. Kia, let's go up and give them a show. As he said that, Long Haochen's right hand clenched and Star King appeared at his side. Ever since getting bathed in the rain of light initiated by Long Haochen, Star King's demeanor seemed different. The golden tint in his pure white fur was even more conspicuous, and his eyes became even more limpid. Long Haochen started to raise himself higher, riding on Star King's back. Shen Lingxin became alarmed. The Saint Knight head shouldn't rush to action rashly. In the battlefield, he naturally couldn't use Long Haochen's name. Haochen replied with a be-at-ease gesture, and called out to Kia, before tapping on Star King's wings, which spread out to head upwards. Meanwhile, Kia turned into a grey glint that followed after Long Haochen's back. Immense black wings spread out from her, following Haochen in the area above the fortress. Long Haochen was waving to Kia to tell her to keep close to his side. In the meantime, the dual-bladed demons lower down were already starting their ascension of the Exorcist city, and the main demon forces were continuously advancing. After the two people had a short, simple conversation, they nodded in succession before scattering to the two sides. The Exorcist mountain was located high in the mountains. Both sides of the city stood on peaks, therefore only the central area was exposed to the enemy. This was a true natural fortress. Relying on those natural advantages, the Exorcist Mountain Pass side had stopped the demons' attacks a lot of times already. Long Haochen and Kia arrived rapidly at their respective sides of the Exorcist Mountain Pass. Riding Star King's back, Long Haochen softly patted him on his neck. Star King, the practical experience you will have in a bit should be beneficial for your evolution. Star King turned round to look at Long Haochen and gratefully nodded in response. Long Haochen took a deep breath, then recovered rippling light. Slowly lifting up his left hand, his divine shield of sun and moon was taken out, yet didn't release its habitual orange radiance. Long Haochen had a slight start, then raised his head to look at the sky. Immediately, he had a flash of realization. Right? Now was the time of daybreak, when sun and moon are crossing. The time when the divine snail of sun and moon was losing effectiveness. But this totally ruined the plan he had just formulated alongside Kia. Kia and him could be said to have everyone's total attention. In case of a careless mistake in the plan, the whole Exorcist Mountain Pass would be the one suffering a terrible blow. On the other side, Kia was floating in midair, looking into the distance. At some point she lifted up her right hand above her head. At that time, the immense sickle of the god of death appeared in her hand soundlessly. Immediately, a wide expanse of grey airflow spread out with Kia as a center, and a dense killing intent spread out all around. Tyrannical waves of spiritual energy giving off a great feeling of substance surrounded her. Kia's hair started to rise up without the wind's help, and her eyes gradually turned into a black color. The sickle of the god of death shook slightly, and twisted grey waves surrounding her kept growing bigger. Long Haochen saw Kia's situation very clearly. His original plan was to unleash his abilities as a god's chosen one alongside her. After all, the demon armies ahead didn't have knowledgeable demons such as Arnan, and now that he had also switched mounts, they wouldn't easily recognize him. Moreover, he had to do it even if it meant getting recognized. If the Exorcist Mountain Pass didn't manage to resist, did it even matter to keep himself concealed anymore? Seeing that Cai'er had already started to unleash her aura of death, Long Houchen didn't start to panic because he was unable to use the divine snail shield of sun and moon. Time waits on no one, and her move gave him the time to give further thoughts. Right now, Long Houchen didn't have any other choice. He didn't have the leisure to try to keep his identity concealed. Unable to wield the divine snail shield of sun and moon, he only had the aria of the goddess of light at his disposal for use. After all, he was still only at the 8th step, therefore relying only on his strength was far from sufficient. Perhaps Cai'er's cultivation was still below his, but she had the ability to fully use the divine tool at her disposal. Right when Long Houchen had steeled himself to use the aria of the goddess of light at its full power, Star King sent him a message. "Master, shall we give it another try? Maybe our joint strength can once again arouse that shield's power." Long Houchen didn't have the time to ponder and accepted promptly. "Okay, then let's give it a try." A large expanse of golden light spread out underneath Star King's feet as his wings spread out. A golden Star of David extended at a frightening speed under him. As this went on, one could see the white hairs on Star King's body turn golden at a frightening speed. Without a doubt, this Starlight Unicorn King was using his original power. The golden star shape on his forehead started to let out a dazzling brilliance which was spreading all over his horn. At the start, it was only a tiny golden light. But it extended like a fire to form a pentagram, reaching a diameter of 10 meters, surrounding Long Houchen and Star King. Just like when Long Houchen was using the storing power ability, a wide golden fog rose up above this pentagram. After Star King's use of this ability, Long Houchen felt the light essence in him turning incomparably thick, as almost all the light around seemed to be collected towards their side. In the sky, the light rays of dawn were a lot dimmer than at their first arrival, and their appearance illuminated the whole battlefield. Star King was using his exclusive ability, as well as the most powerful skill usable by Starlight unicorns. In his whole tribe, only he, as their king, was able to use it. Its name, Star Domain. Star Domain differed greatly from an ordinary domain used by powerhouses of the 9th step, because even as the strongest Starlight unicorn, he was still only reaching the 8th step and no more. Therefore, the scale of the effects of this domain wouldn't be too great. Only reaching a diameter of 10 meters, this domain's utility followed along the Starlight unicorn's abilities, providing an all-around boost. It was able in a short time to increase the concentration of light essence within the domain by 10 times, absorbing the light rays outside at a frantic speed to fill itself up. In this span of time, Star King's body would enter a state close to self-ignition. Therefore this couldn't last for too long, otherwise it would threaten his own life. The fact he was willing to use Star Domain could only mean that Star King put all his faith in Long Houchen, helping hit without sparing any sacrifices. In fact, Star King and Long Houchen didn't have any contract between them, and Long Houchen would definitely not force him into doing such a thing. This was a domain's amplification. Although it didn't reach the level of a forbidden spell due to Star King's level of cultivation, it was already approaching this realm. Long Houchen had almost no hesitation to force out the spiritual energy from his whole body, pouring it into the divine snail shield of sun and moon. Just before, Long Houchen found himself unable to use the power of the divine snail shield of sun and moon at the times of dawn and dusk, each of his attempts having turned fruitless. Even consuming his whole spiritual energy was of no use. After his last experience of wielding the divine snail shield's power as a divine tool, Long Houchen reminisced once again about the last chant left by the divine snail of sun and moon, faintly remembering the deep secrets of the divine snail of sun and moon. It was just that he couldn't unleash this power due to his insufficient level of cultivation, defense of sun and moon, borrowing strength from the owner's heart. Guided by the light, blessed by the gods. As surely as dawn brings a new day, and sunset a new night, when, or as, the sun and moon intertwine, the divine snail shall act as shield. If Long Houchen's guess was correct, this divine snail shield of sun and moon would, at such times, wield the power of a super-divine tool. At this time, he didn't have the time to give much thought to it, and could only pour his spiritual energy into the divine snail shield of sun and moon, attempting to release its might. After all, avoiding using the aria of the goddess of light which would reveal his identity was the best. This time Long Houchen was confident, as he had the golden foundation armor and Star King for support. And this support directly raised his spiritual energy to the state of spiritual highland. After directly pouring the spiritual energy elevated to the spiritual highland into the divine snail shield, its power was much greater. Long Qianying once told him that to activate a divine throne, the state of spiritual highland was a must. Ordinary spiritual energy had no way to get a response from a divine throne. Not only divine thrones, but from Long Qianying's experience, almost all divine tools would require the state of spiritual highland for activation. Cai'er's case was special. In fact, the scythe of the god of death had already become part of her body. At most she was unable to unleash its full might, but could at least use it. But, thinking in another direction, just think of how much Cai'er had to pay since her youth for it, and furthermore, it's not something that just anyone could inherit. As his spiritual energy kept being poured in, Long Houchen's whole perception of the divine snail shield of sun and moon changed. On the other side, the murderous spirit released by Cai'er kept growing in intensity. In terms of might, it was far above Long Houchen's side. After all, Star King's star domain was far from comparing with the pure or inspiring power of the side of the god of death. The feeling the divine snail shield of sun and moon gave Long Houchen was like that of a bottomless abyss. His spiritual energy was rapidly drained, and in the meantime, the spiritual energy coming out from his golden foundation armor started pouring out in torrents, passing through Star King's star domain to be injected into the shield. Although the divine snail shield had yet to give any response up to now, Long Houchen was glad to see that on the horizon, white light was starting to appear. The sun was gradually showing its first rays. Be it at times of dusk or dawn, the times when the sun and moon cross are very short. Only after such times could Long Houchen use the divine snail shield's force. And the shield at its epic tier form combined with God's descent was ample to deter the enemy, and boost their own troops' morale. War was already being carried out all around, the demon army was rapidly sweeping through, and in the fortress, the soldiers in the teams under the brilliant angel knights were risking their lives and tenaciously suppressing the dual-bladed demons advance towards the fortress, preventing them from climbing through. Far off, in the demon army's ranks, dual-headed eagles and birdie demons were rushing at a frightening speed. The sky was clouded in darkness. With the support of the 6 great demon gods from the rear, these flying demons became all the more terrifying. On the ground, a large amount of middle-level demons were mixing among the dual-bladed demons' ranks and approaching the fortress. In the meantime, the many demonic eye soldiers and blazing devils were already preparing their magic. The emo demon god Sytry was in total fury. This time, she violated the demon god emperor's orders and launched an all-out attack to avenge the 2 demon gods. Her plan was simple, she wanted to destroy the Exorcist Mountain Pass and occupy it, so that the demons would be able to advance into the Temple Alliance's territory at any time. Of course, she wouldn't continue to march, otherwise this would really be a challenge towards the demon god emperor's authority, which she didn't dare do. At Cai'er's back appeared a tall virtual silhouette, extending over hundreds of meters and carrying a similar gigantic scythe. From the looks of it, it seemed to be an enlarged version of Cai'er's, only differing in its grey and illusory form. The same leak of murderous spirit had entirely different effects on the Exorcist Mountain Pass. All the soldiers here only felt instant bursts of murderous spirit submerge into them, causing their killing intents to rise subliminally. In their hearts, the war had become their most sacred mission, which gave them the energy to face any enemy. Slaughter's Realm, one of Cai'er's God's Descent techniques. Its effects were unrelated to her own cultivation, as its great ability came entirely from the God's Descent. Of course, due to Cai'er's insufficient cultivation, it was impossible to extend Slaughter's Realm to too great a scale. But in the current focus on close-quarters battles, maintaining this ability was enough to provide support to the Exorcist Mountain Pass. Slaughter's Realm greatly reduced the enemy's momentum due to the terrifying murderous spirit spreading in their ranks. Fear started to rise inside the demons, greatly lowering their fighting strength, while the allies' murderous spirit had a global upgrade. The rise of their murderous spirit enabled them to wield 120% of their normal strength, while becoming unaffected by any external influence. This was the first time Cai'er had attempted to use this realm. She couldn't maintain it for too long a time, and hadn't used it for real until now, due to lacking self-confidence. Before her loss of memories, this would never have happened. But Long Houchen's return not only brought her joy, but also gave the allies someone to rely on. After that stability was gained, her self-confidence was boosted, and she managed to unleash the power from her God's Descent. Due to the influence from Slaughter's Realm, the soldiers from the Exorcist Mountain Pass immediately gained in momentum, and the rushing demons were forced to back down. In their eyes, the 6 distant demon god pillars only worked as lamps, and didn't affect their morale anymore. In contrast, from the effects of Slaughter's Realm, the demons' offense abruptly slowed down, causing them to show sluggish reactions. In reality, Long Houchen's estimate of the Divine Snail Shield's ability was accurate. The chant of the Divine Snail Shield of Sun and Moon was actually a message to tell him that to unleash the most of the Divine Snail Shield's power, it had to be used at dawn or dusk. But Long Houchen's current cultivation was still too low for that, far too low. Therefore, no matter how hard he tried, and how much help Star King gave, he still didn't manage to accomplish that before dawn passed. The 6 great demon gods were still floating behind, wrapped inside their own demon god pillars, and the emo demon god Sytry coldly gazed at the distant fortress, showing the same expression, but secretly startled. The powerful murderous spirit Cai'er generated produced some panic deep inside her. With Cai'er's level of cultivation, Sytry could naturally tell that this was a God's Descent technique, borrowing from the power of a god to attain such a formidable might. But until this day, the Exorcist Mountain Pass had never showed such a scene. Vine, is that the human you attempted to assassinate alongside Alossa? Sytry pointed Cai'er out to the nearby invisible demon god. Vine nodded to her. That's her. But her strength just seems a lot greater. Sytry let out a snort. That's not her strength, but the strength she borrows from a god. A god's chosen one. It looks like she's probably that human girl our crown prince mentioned. So the assassin temple was the place where she had escaped to. Vine continued in a grave tone. That one is the knight that came so suddenly that day, blocking Alossa's path of return and blocking my attacks. I see him as an even more dangerous opponent. If not for him, Alossa wouldn't have died. What is he planning this time? This human may have some special equipment. He's wearing a golden foundation armor belonging to the Knight Temple. The boost provided by this armor is very great, and the shield he used that day against me was extremely tough as well. If not for that, there's no way he could have stopped many attacks from me. Sytry coldly remarked, so these humans believe that they are the only ones that can use forbidden spells? You guys provide cover for me, I will show them our demon race's true strength. While saying that, Sytry's body slowly rose higher, as the other 5 demon gods gathered alongside her. The 6 demon god pillars gathered in the shape of a blossoming flower, with the other 5 demon gods outside, surrounding and protecting the emo demon god Sytry. Sytry slowly raised her hands, and her demon god pillar abruptly burst out with gaudy pink light. Seeing this pink brilliance gave a sweet and sentimental feeling, as if someone were to snatch something from your heart. This itching feeling was hardly bearable. Sytry was clad in a long pink skirt, and her pink hair and eyes, as well as her fiery figure, were extremely enticing. Softly chanting, she started to release pink circles of light. Now, as the 12th ranked demon god, one could see how powerful she was. Her incantation had just started, yet the power of her forbidden spell was already visible. The purple circles that were coming out from her body condensed gradually in the sky, forming a gigantic figure which was 10-fold taller than the one behind Cai'er. As the purple halation was increasing, this figure's shape became clearer and clearer. Shockingly, this figure belonged to the emo demon god herself, an infinitely larger version of Sytry. Her charm was entirely replicated by this gigantic figure, and was growing even further. Even the 6 demon god pillars' brilliance started to look fainter because of this figure. At this sight, even Cai'er Slaughter's realm started to lose in efficacy. The human soldiers all started to feel some panic, for this figure was really far too large, to the extent that to avoid looking at it was already impossible. Sytry's beauty had a boundless charm, causing anyone to be lost in wild and fanciful thoughts. This perfect figure caused all men to have fantasies. The long pink skirt forming the little clothing she had on was lightly swaying. As her figure became clearer, the human soldiers' breathing clearly became more frenetic. The humans started to be lost in their most primitive desires, and the weapons in their hands lost speed. The originally completely suppressed demons rose up immediately, and the battles around the fortress became extremely desperate. Originally focused on commanding, Shenglingxin's expression changed totally upon noticing that immense figure, losing his voice, the emo demon god Sytry. She's using a forbidden spell. Lan Yenyu was standing alongside her husband. What kind of forbidden spell is that? Have you seen it before? Shenglingxin's response was grave. Sytry is known as the emo demon god because she is the master of lust in all demonkind. Her forbidden spell may not be a direct attack, but it's a lot more terrifying than the direct attacks. It can arouse our most primitive desires. Even at my level of cultivation, I am starting to be unable to think clearly, to say nothing about the soldiers. Lan Yenyu became anxious. Then what's to be done? Is there a way to interrupt her? Shenglingxin let out a bitter smile. Haven't you seen the other 5 demon gods surrounding her? Their 6 pillars have also gathered their power. How could it be possible to interrupt that? We can only leave it to grandfather and the others. Lan Yenyu wrinkled her brows. What if you don't look at her? Shenglingxin shook her head. It's useless. This is still just the edge of the forbidden spell. And at Sytry's level of cultivation, if averting your eyes from her was enough to annihilate her forbidden spell's power, how could she be ranked 12th among the demon gods? Lan Yenyu then asked in puzzlement, but how is it that I don't feel anything from it? Females should be immune against her forbidden spells. But our soldiers are males. Reaching this point, his look unconsciously shifted to Cai'er in midair, then to Long Haochen who was still motionlessly releasing golden circles of light. Shenglingxin faintly came to feel that this battle would relate to the life or death of the Exorcist Mountain Pass. If something went wrong, the Exorcist Mountain Pass may very well go extinct from this world. And at that time, there's no way the Assassin Temple could preserve itself. He was now considering whether to cover the retreat of Long Haochen and his daughter to preserve at least a bit of the Assassin Temple's lineage. As her father, he finally started to show personal feelings. Long Haochen also saw the forbidden spell unleashed by the emo demon god Sytry. It immediately startled him. The effects on him were different from Shenglingxin as he was inside the star domain, and had the assistance from the overflowing light essence as well as his powerful mental force which made his perception reach frightening heights. He found out that Syr's forbidden spell was like a projection. This forbidden spell's use was only to produce special spatial waves to project her figure beside the Exorcist Mountain Pass fortress. In other words, the demons below won't be able to see, unless they reach the fortress. Otherwise, they won't be affected by her forbidden spell. Long Hao-Chen was now no more than a spectator, watching clearly over this baffling situation. He discovered that after Syry started to use this forbidden spell, the demon troops' attack actually became slower. Only the dual-bladed demons were still rushing forward with their all, while the other demons of middle and high class clearly slowed down. It's just that because the dual-bladed demons were unceasingly swarming through the fort's walls, this change was not very noticeable. Long Hao-Chen immediately came to the conclusion that the Emo demon god's forbidden spell was also effective against demons. In fact, the chief of the Assassin Temple, heroic assassin Xing Yu, had commanded the powerhouses from the Assassin Temple to stealthily lead the Exorcist Mountain Pass. Affected by Long Hao-Chen's opinion and the great results achieved during the Eve's raid, Xing Yu thoroughly realized what they should do as assassins. By remaining in the Exorcist Mountain Pass, these powerhouses couldn't have much usefulness and could only stand opposite to the enemy. But they were assassins, not mags, and for this reason, even an heroic assassin of the 9th step couldn't launch forbidden spells of large scale. So, they could only serve as ambushes outside the Exorcist Mountain, acting as an extremely sharp blade pointed at the enemy. This would be a far more efficient defense than if they stayed inside the Exorcist Mountain Pass. They were the ones who started this huge fire, which also thoroughly emptied the demon's food reserves. But Xing Yu's expression was extremely grave. He had perceived that Syry had begun to use a forbidden spell, but from the rear of the demon army, he only saw an illusory pink figure and was unable to discern the ability Syry was using. As Long Hao-Chen had observed, Syry's forbidden spell was indeed no more than a projection of herself on the Exorcist Mountain Pass. This was so that it doesn't affect the demon army, one won't be affected unless he's on the side of the Exorcist Mountain Pass. Heroic assassins, follow me. We will be raiding the high-level demons from their rear. Xing Yu almost had no hesitation giving this order. They couldn't let Syry get away with that, otherwise the Exorcist Mountain Pass would be in peril. 11 twisted lights faded away in midair. Then he could faintly see that behind the 6 demon god pillars, the sky had abruptly started to look distorted, imbued with an incomparably sharp killing intent which immediately locked the 6 demon gods in place. As if Syry hadn't noticed these heroic assassins, she just kept chanting her incantation. That materialized figure kept becoming clearer, as if a giant version of her was taking shape in this world. The influence it had on the Exorcist Mountain Pass kept growing larger, as the eyes of the soldiers were turning red. Thanks to Cai'er's Slaughter's realm, they could hold off the forbidden spell to some extent, but right now, Cai'er's forehead was already covered in sweat. No matter how powerful a god's chosen one is, how mighty her side of the god of death, ultimately, she hit the limits of the 7th step. If Cai'er's cultivation had attained the 9th step, her Slaughter's realm could maybe have even suppressed Syry's forbidden spell. But this was out of her current capabilities. Keeping the realm activated was only a desperate measure. If it dissipated, the soldiers below would be even more greatly affected. Cai'er gritted her teeth, painfully holding on. Right, because she understood the situation, she didn't dare slack. I have to press on, to keep it lasting as far as possible. Her eyes fixed onto Long Hao-Chen, on the other side of the Exorcist Mountain Pass fortress. She didn't know what he was doing, but had an unwavering faith in him. He will surely turn the situation around, for sure. Strident sounds burst from the rear of the 6 demon god pillars. In midair, an immense spatial crack extending over more than 300 meters had appeared, extending towards the emo demon god Syry. Chief, what's to be done? An assassin was wiping the blood leaking from his mouth, as he asked Xing Yu. Xing Yu's eyes were a bit bloodshot. He knew that in these circumstances, Syry's forbidden spell was already unstoppable. It was totally impossible, and this was the situation he was the most unwilling to see appear. If they were peak powerhouses belonging to the Mage Temple, maybe they could try to use the firepower from their own forbidden spells to face Syry's forbidden spell. But in the Temple Alliance, 2 temples weren't able to use forbidden spells much, the Assassin and Warrior Temple. In singular battles, they were more powerful, as their spiritual highland mastery and toughness far surpassed the Mage Temple, Spiritual Temple, and Priest Temple. But they had no way to break through the Demon God Pillar's blockade. Xing Yu's breathing was noticeably rapid. As the chief of the Assassin Temple, he had already predicted the worst outcomes. Giving a glance to the 6 demon god pillars and gritting his teeth, he gave an order that felt extremely painful to issue. Kill. While they are focusing on their forbidden spells, we will slaughter their high-level demons. I want to see whether they can kill our men before we kill theirs. This was already the best choice they had. If they'd only had another choice, Xing Yu wouldn't give such an order. As things went this way, the other 10 assassins' eyes also turned red. This order felt extremely difficult for him to issue. His grandson Shen Lingxin was commanding the battle inside the Exorcist Mountain Pass, while his great-granddaughter was giving her all to withstand the forbidden spell. In case the Emo Demon God's forbidden spell completes, they will inevitably be the ones bearing the brunt. Kill! The 11 heroic assassins shouted madly all together. Under the shocked watch of the demon gods beyond the Emo Demon God, they turned the same as wild dragons, sweeping their way downwards through the demon armies. The attacks launched by the 11 powerhouses of the ninth step against the demon armies were no joke. Assassins were not experts in attacks of large scale, but their offensive power in small scales was far beyond contest even when compared to mags. In front of the 11 of them, the demons were in a pitiful state. Even demon powerhouses of the 7th or 8th step were unable to last, and for a moment, the high-ranked demons in the rear were in a state of chaos. This time, it wasn't a surprise attack, but a total slaughter going ever faster. The great demon god's expressions immediately became unsightly. The reason why the powerhouses of the 9th step from both sides generally don't lightly join a battle was to avoid a total slaughter of both sides. The destructive power of powerhouses of the 9th step is far too extreme. In cases when they join in battle opposing themselves against enemies of lower rank, it will inevitably end up in a bloody slaughter. And in the end, both sides will end up totally crushed. Just like the Exorcist Mountain Pass couldn't bear the powerful forbidden spell of the Emo Demon God, the demons couldn't bear the frantic attacks of so many powerhouses of the 9th step. Right after Xing Yu's figure landed on the ground, a pair of daggers shining with the orange gloss that characterizes the epic tier appeared in his hand. The orange radiance spread out with him as the center, instantly lacerating the bodies of several dozen demons of high class. Immediately, he appeared 100 meters away, whirling like a spinning top. No one saw clearly by which means he was breaking inside their ranks, but every series of whirls took the life of over 100 demon powerhouses. The ordinary demons of the 4th or 5th step stood absolutely no chance in front of this radiance characterizing the epic tier. The same scene broke out for each of the 11 powerhouses. Their destructive power had already grown far beyond last night's raid. The Emo Demon God Sytry's expression became very unsightly. Her chant was still continuing, and now that she had already reached a point of no return, if she stopped for a moment, all her previous efforts will be wasted. And on top of that, she couldn't let the other 5 demon gods respond to that attack. Otherwise, if a human assassin flanks her and interrupts her forbidden spell, it will put her in a beaten and hopeless position. The Emo Demon God had to finish her forbidden spells cast first, to first ruthlessly inflict a fatal strike to the Exorcist Mountain Pass before dealing with these assassins of the 9th step to the rear. But at this time, it would be hard to say how many high-grade demons will be left. At this time, the 6 demon gods were still not brain-dead. The winged ox Sagan may be the lowest of these 6 demon gods, but after standing opposite to the Exorcist Mountain Pass for such a long time, his understanding of the Assassin Temple's strength was not half-assed. Seeing this messy, nearly uncontrollable, situation, he immediately let out a wild shout to the demons, giving an order. This order gave a sudden realization to the other demon gods who hastened to join him in giving orders. Sagan's order was very simple: global retreat. Every side must retreat. In front of their eyes, that distant, gigantic female image had become totally real, and Sytry's forbidden spell was close to completion. Her extremely enlarged face exuded a charming smile, and soft pink light was filling the Exorcist Mountain Pass in a liberating warmth. All the soldiers had become flushed with excitement, and some already couldn't stop from tearing apart their own clothes and armors. The Emo Demon God's charm was far too great. All of a sudden, massive pink brilliant rays soared as if finally giving life to that gigantic figure, setting it in motion. The forbidden spell was complete. The gigantic Sytry slowly stepped forward, softly moving her voluptuous forms. Immediately, groans were heard on the Exorcist Mountain Pass, and the soldiers' weapons fell one after another from their hands. Even the influence of Cai'er's realm of slaughter had reached its lowest point. Cai'er spat out a mouthful of blood, already on the verge of collapse. Her spiritual energy was already past its limits, and at that point Slaughter's realm could crumble at any time. At that very moment, even Shen Lingxin couldn't help himself. Even he, the commander-in-chief of the army, was severely shaking, bearing an unbearable pain. This first step she took was only the start of Sytry's forbidden spell. Immediately, the gigantic woman unexpectedly started a light and graceful dance in midair. Each step was simple, every movement she executed and every exciting glance she gave didn't fail to deeply affect the soldiers of the Exorcist Mountain Pass. Some of them were already in a frantic state. Some of the soldiers of lowest cultivation had thrown themselves to the west, falling from the top of the fortress. But even in such falls, the frantic looks on their eyes weren't appeased in the slightest. They were already beyond liberation from Sytry's forbidden spell. The Emo Demon God's celestial dance of lust. A powerful hallucinatory forbidden spell. Part 1 end here.